Welcome everyone. Today our group will be discussing violence against women as we agree that this issue plays a very important role in all of each of our respective specialisations. With each of our group members, we have each decided to focus on a subgroup of people whom the issue of domestic violence affects from the lens of each of our specialisations. Starting with, I will be addressing the impact domestic violence has upon victims of a clinical psychology viewpoint. Secondly, Madeline will be discussing the perpetrator from a forensic psychologist specialisation. Veronica will be third and will discuss the impact upon children and how to address this from a counselling psychology view. And Hannah will be finishing our discussion with a conclusion of how domestic violence can impact the community and how to address this from a community psychologist standpoint. Domestic violence can be defined as violent or aggressive behaviour within the home and will typically involve the abuse of a spouse or partner. This behaviour can be physical, sexual, psychosocial, emotional, or economical. A report from the World Health Organization in 2002 has stated that victims of domestic violence most commonly occurred against women, which is why we'll be referring to women as the main victims in this presentation. This is not to say that domestic violence does not have men as the victims as well, or to discount that. Just as statistics have found that women are the most likely victims or the most likely to report. Results from the World Health Organization studies have shown that 10 to 65% of women across the globe have been victimized by their husbands, partners, or significant others at some points in their lives. The reason why this statistic is so broad is because different areas have had largely big differences in their statistics. A study from Hans Almes et al. Has in 2018 of 400 women over the age of 18 showed that 19.3% of women reported violence received only from their husbands, 5.2% of this group reported violence from only people other than their spouses, and 10% received violence from both parties. In this study, it was also shown that 85% of women who were exposed to violence at some point in their lives were also exposed to physical violence by their partners or their spouses. So what makes it more likely that women will experience domestic violence in their lives? What are the risk factors? Studies have shown that some of the biggest risk factors are being exposed to violence in childhood, having no income, having low or no educational levels, which can also limit job opportunities or independence, marriages before 18 years of age, alcohol and drug issues, neglect in childhood, history of psychiatric disorders, and attitudes that are accepting of violence and gender equality. The impact of domestic violence against women is a heavy and traumatic one. Han Almes states that this exposure to violence causes mental health issues, a dramatic decrease in the quality of life for women, increased use of medical services, and also can impact the mental development of the children who are exposed to this violence. However, Veronica will go more in depth with this discussion on children. Types of mental illness that can occur involve post-traumatic stress disorder, depression and anxiety. This may culminate in increased suicide attempts or ideation, and alcohol or substance abuse as a form of escapism. It has been found that the longer these periods of violence occur for, the more profound the impacts are. Often women will lose all self-confidence and thoughts of control. They may even self-blame and get their emotional intelligence can often become stunted, as has been shown in a study from Thierry Goethes and Luxac in 2016. Ways to assist victims of domestic violence can be summed up in 3 points: treatment of mental illnesses, assistance in navigating or finding resources, and educating not only the individuals but also the wider community. As I have stated earlier in this presentation, exposure to violence, especially for prolonged periods of time, can bring about a multitude of mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Cognitive behavioural therapy and working on building a rapport with the client can assist in building up their self-esteem and challenge their unhelpful thoughts, whilst also providing them with some coping strategies against their own mental illnesses. I personally see this as a band-aid fix in this scenario of the client being a domestic violence victim, as it will treat the symptoms, but it will not remove the cause of it. As such, the victim may continue to spiral back down into depression and etc., unless they are able to remove themselves from the situation. Although I've stated that it's a band-aid fix, I don't wish to discount the importance of this step, as building the victim back up and giving them valuable coping strategies will assist them in being able to recognise their situation and hopefully extricate themselves from it. A large issue that victims of domestic violence face is how to extricate themselves from the situation. This would include who to inform, what steps to take, and what resources are available. In previous studies from McAfee and Uruburu in 2001 and 2013 respectively, they discovered that women were much more likely to discuss the issue of domestic violence with their family doctor or religious leaders such as rabbis, priests, etc., than they were with the local police force. This could be due to lack of knowledge about resources available to assist them, or a fear of what may occur if law enforcement becomes involved, especially if their spouse is manipulating them through fear of taking their children. Another barrier to accessing resources that becomes particularly relevant in Australia surrounds our large migrant culture. Migrant women are much more vulnerable in society than other women already due to their feelings of isolation and limited access to resources in the community. But when they become victims of domestic violence, this intensifies this feeling of isolation and their inability to seek help from the appropriate resources. Canine and Stubbs' 1997 research stated that Filipino women in Australia were 6 times more likely than other Australian women to be victims of homicide. Often these women are dependent on their partners, are financially insecure, and don't have the linguistic skills to reach out for help. Things have improved for migrant women with the updates that have been added to the domestic violence provision in 2007. They are now able to have immediate access to the country and its resources if evidence of domestic violence can be proven. They also have integrated allowing this evidence to be provided from a trusted family doctor instead of just the police, which has improved reporting rates drastically. In clinical psychology, we should be aware of these barriers and discuss better ways of implementing assistance and resources to the individuals that need them. This may involve appointing translators frequently to give more access to non-English speaking clients, more education for psychologists about cultural norms and how to approach people from other cultures about these sensitive issues, or education in smaller communities about signs of domestic violence and the resources they can access to leave this situation. Clinical psychologists should also create a range of resources that their client, English or otherwise, may need to assist them in gaining back their independence and leaving their dangerous and currently harmful situation. Lastly, I believe clinical psychologists can assist with providing case studies and research to develop effective domestic violence campaigns to bring awareness to potential victims about what is abuse and what resources are available to them should they believe they are in this situation. There should be more research based in the broadly different areas of Australia, such as rural and urban, and these campaigns should be tailored to suit the individual areas. These campaigns may not only reach out to the victim, but to those who are important in their lives, who may not have recognised what is happening to the individual and can access resources on behalf of the victim and encourage them to extricate themselves from the situation. Whilst this last point I have made on an individual and a community level, I believe that it will create a trickle-down effect in which we will see more awareness of domestic violence in the future and fewer cases of it. A clinical psychologist should assist their client in accessing the appropriate resources if they believe that they need assistance in this area, and may also work on research into making these resources more accessible for the individuals. These are my references, and thank you very much for attending.